Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Red Room Stories. I know many of you tune in to these tales to help you drift off to sleep. So before we settle in, I'd love for each of you to leave a comment sharing where in the world you're listening from. And if you're enjoying the episodes, don't forget to give a like and subscribe to the channel. Now let's get comfortable, relax, and begin. Nestled deep within the mist-shrouded hills of northern England lay a forgotten hamlet, known only as Black Hollow. Few outsiders ventured there, and those who did often returned with fragmented memories or not at all. The village was rumored to be cursed, its inhabitants bound by an ancient pact that kept them hidden from the modern world. Among the curious few drawn to this enigma was Eleanor Graves, a historian determined to uncover the truth behind the eerie tales. Eleanor arrived on a dreary autumn afternoon, her boots crunching against frost-laden grass as she approached the village's weathered gates. A sign hung crookedly above, bearing faded letters spelling Black Hollow, "Enter freely, leave lightly." She chuckled nervously at the ominous phrase but pressed onward, driven by a mix of skepticism and fascination. As she crossed the threshold, the air grew unnervingly still, as though holding its breath. The village appeared frozen in time, its cobblestone streets lined with cottages that seemed untouched for centuries. Windows were darkened, yet faint whispers drifted through the silence, indistinct yet undeniably human. Ignoring the creeping dread, Eleanor wandered toward the town square, where a decrepit well stood at the center. Its stones bore strange carving symbols, resembling eyes staring blankly into eternity. Her exploration led her to an old church perched on a hill overlooking the village. Inside, pews sat coated in dust, and the altar was adorned with blackened candles that looked recently extinguished. On the wall hung a portrait of a man whose piercing gaze followed her every move. Beneath it, a plaque read, "Father Alaric Thorne, Keeper of the Veil." Something about his expression unsettled her deeply. As dusk fell, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. Shadows stretched unnaturally long, twisting like living things across the ground. The whispers grew louder, forming disjointed phrases that sent chills down her spine. "Leave now," they urged, "before it claims you too." Despite her mounting fear, Eleanor refused to abandon her quest. She retrieved her journal and began documenting everything, hoping logic would dispel the growing unease. Hours later, while sketching one of the symbols near the well, Eleanor noticed something peculiar, a faint glow emanating from beneath the earth. Digging cautiously, she unearthed a small wooden box containing a tattered map. It depicted Black Hollow surrounded by intricate patterns resembling roots or veins, with a single location marked the Heartwood. Guided by the map, Eleanor trekked into the surrounding forest, where gnarled trees loomed like silent sentinels. The path twisted unpredictably, leading her deeper into darkness until she reached a massive oak tree at the heart of the woods. Its trunk was scarred with runes identical to those on the map, and at its base lay an iron hatch embedded in the soil. Hesitating only briefly, she pried it open and descended into the unknown. Below ground, she discovered a cavern illuminated by bioluminescent fungi, casting an ethereal green glow. At its center stood an altar carved from stone, atop which rested a leather-bound book. Opening it revealed pages filled with cryptic text written in a language she couldn't decipher. One passage, however, stood out clearly. "When the veil thins, so shall the living join the lost." Suddenly, the ground trembled violently, and the walls began to close inward. Panicked, Eleanor grabbed the book and sprinted back toward the surface. Emerging into the night air, she found the village transformed. Candles flickered in every window, and shadowy figures moved silently through the streets, their faces obscured by hoods. They converged on her, encircling her without uttering a word. Desperate for answers, Eleanor confronted the figure nearest to her, pulling back its hood. To her shock, She saw her own face staring back at her older, wearier, but unmistakably hers. Before she could react, another voice called out, commanding the crowd to part. From their midst emerged Father Alaric Thorne, his presence exuding authority. "You've awakened the cycle," he intoned gravely. "Now you must take your place." Confusion gave way to terror as Eleanor realized the horrifying truth. The villagers weren't ghosts, they were future versions of themselves, trapped in an endless loop dictated by the cursed artifact she now held. Each generation sacrificed one individual to maintain the balance, ensuring the veil between worlds remained intact. And now, it was her turn. Refusing to accept this fate, Eleanor devised a plan. Returning to the church, she scoured its archives for clues, eventually finding a ritual described in faded ink. According to legend, destroying the artifact during the witching hour would sever the connection, but doing so required willing participation from someone already claimed by the curse. Knowing the risks, she sought out the version of herself she'd encountered earlier. Convincing her doppelganger proved harder than expected. The older Eleanor harbored resentment toward her younger self, blaming her for perpetuating the cycle. Yet, after hours of pleading, she finally relented, agreeing to help break the curse once and for all. Together, they returned to the Heartwood, performing the ritual under the watchful eyes of unseen forces. As midnight struck, the artifact erupted in blinding light, shattering into countless shards. The ground quaked violently, and the air filled with anguished screams as the barrier between worlds collapsed. When the chaos subsided, Eleanor found herself alone in the forest, the village nowhere to be seen. Relief washed over her until she caught sight of her reflection in a nearby stream. Her features had changed subtly, aging prematurely. Worse still, faint traces of the runes from the oak tree now marred her skin, glowing faintly in the moonlight. A disembodied voice echoed around her, whispering words that chilled her to the bone. The debt is paid, for now. Weeks later, Eleanor attempted to resume her life, but strange occurrences plagued her daily existence. Objects vanished inexplicably, clocks stopped at random intervals, and strangers addressed her by names she didn't recognize. Consulting experts yielded no answers until she met Margaret Kane, a scholar specializing in dimensional anomalies. After hearing her story, Margaret revealed the devastating truth. Destroying the artifact hadn't ended the curse. It had merely transferred its burden onto Eleanor. "You carry the weight of Black Hollow now," Margaret explained solemnly. "Its fate rests in your hands." With no choice but to accept her new reality, Eleanor vowed to protect others from suffering the same fate. But as she gazed into the mirror late one night, she noticed something chilling. The runes etched into her flesh were beginning to spread. And then softly came the whispers again. On the outskirts of a small, fog-drenched town in northern Wales stood an abandoned mansion known as Black Thistle Hall. Its towering spires and cracked windows loomed over the countryside like a specter of forgotten times. Locals avoided it, speaking only in hushed tones about the strange occurrences that surrounded it, lights flickering in empty rooms, disembodied laughter echoing through the halls, and the faint sound of breathing emanating from within its walls. For years, no one dared approach the estate until Marcus Hale arrived. A paranormal investigator with a reputation for debunking myths, Marcus dismissed the tales as mere superstition. Armed with cameras, audio recorders, and a healthy dose of skepticism, he set out to prove there was nothing supernatural about Black Thistle Hall. But as he crossed the threshold into the decaying structure, he felt an undeniable shift, an oppressive weight pressing down on him, as though the house itself were alive and watching. The interior was a labyrinth of shadows and decay. Faded wallpaper peeled away from damp walls, and the air carried the scent of mildew and something metallic, almost coppery. As Marcus explored further, His equipment began malfunctioning sporadically. His flashlight dimmed without warning, forcing him to rely on emergency lanterns. Then came the whisper-soft, indistinct murmurs that seemed to emanate from the very fabric of the building itself. Ignoring the growing unease, Marcus pressed onward, documenting every detail meticulously. He reached what appeared to be a grand study, its centerpiece a massive desk covered in yellowed papers. Among them, he found a journal belonging to someone named Evelyn Blackthistle, the last known resident of the hall. The entries detailed her descent into madness, describing vivid hallucinations of the house breathing around her and accusing her of crimes she swore she hadn't committed. As Marcus read deeper, the temperature plummeted, and the whispers grew louder, forming fragmented sentences. "Leave us. You shouldn't have come. Hungers." Shaken but undeterred, Marcus snapped photos of the journal before tucking it into his bag. Just then, a gust of wind slammed the door shut behind him, plunging the room into near-total darkness. Panic surged through him, but he forced himself to stay calm, fumbling for his lighter. Illuminating the space revealed something chilling. The ink on the journal pages had begun to bleed, spreading across the paper in dark rivulets. Even more disturbing were the words now forming spontaneously. "Feed it." Staring at the cryptic message, Marcus felt a cold certainty settle in his chest. This wasn't just a haunted house, it was something far older and more malevolent. Determined to uncover the truth, Marcus ventured deeper into the mansion, eventually finding himself in the basement. The air here was suffocatingly thick, and the walls glistened faintly, as though coated in moisture. At the center of the room stood an iron-bound chest, its surface etched with intricate carvings resembling roots twisting together. Against his better judgment, Marcus opened it, revealing a collection of artifacts, dolls with hollow eyes, rusted keys, and a vial filled with shimmering liquid. Touching the vial triggered a vision so vivid it left him reeling. He saw Evelyn standing in the same basement, clutching the vial tightly as shadowy tendrils emerged from the walls, wrapping around her limbs. Her screams echoed deafeningly before fading into silence. When the vision ended, Marcus realized he was no longer alone. Figures cloaked in darkness surrounded him, their forms shifting unnaturally. Desperation drove him to act. Recalling a passage from Evelyn's journal, Marcus poured the contents of the vial onto the floor, chanting the words she claimed could banish the entity haunting the house. The reaction was immediate. The ground quaked violently, and the walls groaned as though protesting the intrusion. The figures recoiled, dissolving into wisps of smoke, but not before one lunged forward, gripping his wrist with icy fingers. Pain seared through Marcus's arm as the phantom's touch branded his skin with symbols resembling those carved into the chest. Collapsing to the floor, he watched as the basement caved in, sealing itself off entirely. When he finally stumbled outside, gasping for fresh air, dawn was breaking over the horizon. Relief washed over him until he noticed the marks on his arm glowing faintly under the sunlight. Over the following weeks, Marcus struggled to return to normalcy. Sleep eluded him, plagued by nightmares of the house and its inhabitants. Objects in his apartment rearranged themselves inexplicably, and whispers followed him wherever he went. Consulting Dr. Helena Cross, an expert in folklore and metaphysics, he learned the horrifying truth. The ritual hadn't destroyed the entity, it had bound it to him instead. The house chooses its caretakers, Helena explained grimly. By performing the rite, you became its new anchor. Refusing to accept this fate, Marcus sought answers elsewhere, eventually discovering a hidden compartment in the journal containing a map. It led to a remote island off the coast of Scotland, where another structure identical to Blackthistle Hall supposedly stood. Traveling there, Marcus found the second mansion eerily similar yet devoid of life. Inside, he encountered mirrors reflecting not his image but scenes from Blackthistle Hall. Evelyn screaming, the shadows closing in, and finally himself pouring the vial's contents. Realizing the connection between the two houses, Marcus smashed the largest mirror, hoping to sever the link. What followed was chaos. Glass shards exploded outward, slicing through the air as unearthly howls filled the space. When the storm subsided, Marcus stood amidst the wreckage, bloodied but alive. Yet, as he turned to leave, he caught sight of his reflection in a shard still clinging to the frame. His eyes glowed faintly, and his lips moved silently, forming words he couldn't hear. Back home, Marcus resumed his work, attempting to piece together what had happened. But the house wasn't done with him. Late one night, as he reviewed footage from his investigation, he noticed something impossible figure standing in the background of every shot. Closer inspection revealed it wasn't just any figure, it was Evelyn Blackthistle, staring directly at the camera. Her voice whispered softly in his ear, "Thank you for setting me free." And then Marcus understood. The curse hadn't been lifted, it had simply passed to him. In the heart of a desolate valley, shrouded by perpetual twilight, lay an abandoned carnival known as Mirrored Mirth. Its faded marquees and rusted rides whispered tales of joy long extinguished, replaced by something far darker. The locals spoke of it only in hushed tones, warning that those who entered rarely returned, and those who did came back changed, their faces unrecognizable even to loved ones. Ignoring these warnings was Clara Darrow, a photographer obsessed with capturing the macabre. Clara arrived on a cold autumn evening, her camera slung over her shoulder and curiosity burning in her chest. The air carried the faint scent of burnt sugar and decay, mingling unsettlingly as she stepped through the creaking gates. Above her, a sign swayed gently in the breeze, "Mirrored Mirth, where your reflection knows you best." She chuckled nervously at the cryptic phrase, but pressed onward, eager to uncover the secrets hidden within. The carnival seemed frozen in time, its attractions draped in cobwebs and dust. Carousel horses stood motionless, their painted eyes gleaming eerily in the dim light. A funhouse loomed ahead, its entrance flanked by distorted mirrors that warped Clara's reflection into grotesque shapes. As she approached, a low hum resonated from within, growing louder with each step. It wasn't mechanical, it sounded almost alive. Inside, the funhouse twisted unnaturally, corridors stretching impossibly long before looping back on themselves. Every mirror she passed reflected not just her image but fragments of others' faces flickering briefly before vanishing. Some looked familiar, though she couldn't place them. Others were contorted into expressions of pure anguish. Each glance left her more disoriented, as if the reflections were pulling at her very soul. Desperate for answers, Clara ventured deeper, eventually stumbling upon a locked door adorned with intricate carvings resembling human profiles fused together. Beside it hung a small plaque inscribed with a single name, Lila Morgan. Prying the door open, she discovered a room filled with photographs pinned to the walls. Each depicted visitors to the carnival, their smiles gradually fading frame by frame until they became hollow-eyed strangers. Among the images, one caught her attention, a woman bearing a striking resemblance to herself, though older and gaunt. Beneath it was scrawled, "She saw too much." Chills raced down Clara's spine as realization dawned. These weren't ordinary portraits. They documented the transformation of those who dared gaze too deeply into the mirrors. And now, her reflection stared back at her from the glass behind her, mouthing words she couldn't hear. Panic surged, but Clara forced herself to focus. Searching the room, she found a journal belonging to Lila Morgan, the carnival's former owner. Its pages revealed a chilling truth. The mirrors didn't merely reflect, they consumed. Each visitor surrendered pieces of themselves, their identities eroded, until nothing remained but empty shells. Lila had tried to destroy the mirrors, but failed, ultimately becoming part of the curse herself. Determined to break the cycle, Clara devised a plan. Using her camera, she began photographing the mirrors, hoping to capture evidence of their malevolence. With each flash, the glass cracked slightly, releasing faint screams that echoed through the funhouse. Encouraged, she pressed on, snapping shot after shot until the largest mirror shattered completely, revealing a dark void beyond. From the abyss emerged figures clad in tattered clothing, their faces obscured beneath veils of shadow. They moved silently, encircling her with an aura of menace. Among them stood a figure whose veil lifted briefly, revealing Lila Morgana what remained of her. Her once vibrant features were now skeletal, her eyes glowing with unnatural light. "You cannot escape," she rasped, extending a hand toward Clara. Summoning every ounce of courage, Clara hurled her camera at the void, shattering the remaining mirrors in a cascade of glass and sparks. The figures recoiled, dissolving into mist as the funhouse collapsed around her. When the chaos subsided, Clara found herself outside, gasping for breath under the pale moonlight. Relief washed over her until she glanced at her hands. Her skin bore faint traces of cracks, like fractured glass, spreading slowly across her arms. Worse still, when she looked into a puddle nearby, her reflection smiled back at her, not her own smile, but someone else's entirely. Back home, strange occurrences plagued her daily life. Voices whispered in languages she didn't understand, and objects rearranged themselves without explanation. Consulting Dr. Evelyn Cross, a specialist in metaphysical phenomena, Clara learned the horrifying truth. Destroying the mirrors hadn't ended the curse had bound her to it. "The reflections always find a way back," Evelyn explained gravely. "By confronting them, you became their new vessel." Desperate for redemption, Clara sought out others who had escaped the carnival, hoping to piece together a solution. Her search led her to Nathaniel Graves, a man whose face appeared smooth and featureless, as though erased by time itself. He recounted his own harrowing escape, revealing a hidden ritual meant to sever ties with the mirrors. Together, they traveled to the ruins of Mirrored Mirth, performing the rite under the cover of a blood-red moon. As the final incantation left their lips, the ground quaked violently, and the remnants of the carnival imploded into ash. But victory proved fleeting. Days later, Clara noticed her reflection behaving independently, mimicking actions moments before she performed them. Then came the whispers again, louder this time. One night, as she stared into the bathroom mirror, her reflection reached out, its hand breaking through the surface and gripping her wrist tightly. "You should have stayed," it whispered, dragging her forward. When morning came, the house was silent. Neighbors found no trace of Clara, but her camera remained, its memory card containing thousands of photos. Each showed the same thing: Clara's face, smiling serenely, surrounded by countless others staring blankly into the lens.